This might be an incredibly spicy take, and it is one that I've dropped before, but not anything that I really draw emphasis to. But as somebody who's been gaming all the way back, like my first console was the Sega Genesis, I can understand the nostalgia for the 16, 24, and 32-bit eras, okay? The 2D side-scrolling pixel-based art, I can understand that, okay? And I can also understand like different types of art styles that were popping up in and around PS2, Xbox 360 era, like your cel-shaded Legend of Zelda Wind Waker art styles. Beautiful Joe as well is another one that comes to mind. Like, I can understand the nostalgia for that. But when it comes to the PS1, early 3D pre-rendered graphic stuff, like, I cannot get behind that at all. I thought it always looked like shit. It always looked like a video game, okay? And not in the way developers want you to look and play a video game. It never really jived with me, and the people trying to bring it back, especially a lot of the indie slop that is out there trying to recreate that style at the time. I think the early PlayStation, Nintendo 64 era, that stuff has aged like milk, especially pairing and contrasting the NES, Master System, Genesis, Super Nintendo era. Somebody else who holds my similar approach is somebody who was very much working during that time, Koji Sugimoto, okay, Final Fantasy developer, kind of hates all the retro PS1 graphics nostalgia. You'll love to see it. Video game visuals have come a long way since the 90s. The jump between pixel art and polygons was a massive one, and one that had probably the most growing pains. The players still had to rely on a bit of imagination to fully see the things game developers were trying to depict at the time. Now that we have graphics that could be mistaken for reality and have for like a decade plus, but whatever. We've also seen a wave of games intentionally recreate the look and feel of retro titles, and honestly, there's not a game that hasn't received a remake or a remaster out of that era that hasn't come out better as a consequence. I'm speaking as objectively as I can. Like, I'm sure there's probably some weirdos that are out there that say like those early Resident Evil games on the PlayStation probably are better than any of the remakes that Capcom has made, but I don't know a single person that thinks that the Resident Evil 2 remake isn't better than the first one. But whatever, man. If you like tank controls and really jaggy visuals, you go for it, man. But you might know, yes, Koji Sugimoto, the Square Enix programmer who has worked on games like Final Fantasy and Xenogears. But unless you've been following him on social media for the past handful of years, you might have missed the legendary game developers discussing the trend of modern low-poly games. So to put it mildly, he's not a fan. In 2019, Sugimoto expressed an intense dislike of, I didn't even know this, okay, of recreating retro graphics while discussing a news article on a recent push to recapture the charm of old-school games. I spent a lot of futile effort and computation time to avoid it, Sugimoto says. The idea of finding it interesting to reproduce doesn't occur to me. Machine translation differs a bit on his adjective of choice when describing what he thinks the intentional texture distortion that developers rely on to hark back to earlier video game generations. According to Google, he calls it abhorrent, where Grok translates it to say the trend is an object of disdain. Ultimately, Sugimoto appears to be expressing something deeply negative for the nostalgia-driven graphics. I would agree, because for a lot of the indie slop that's out there, they use that as a means of storytelling and to prop up their fanfic level narrative. They just rely on the, oh, it looks like and it feels like an old PS1 game, even though it's devoid of anything intelligent or notable otherwise. He hates it enough, yes, to return to the topic years later. More recently, Sugimoto offered his 2 cents on the new feature for a game engine that makes it easier for developers to distort and warp textures. The technique would automate the process needed to approximate low-poly graphics, which will likely be useful to game creators working on modern throwbacks. But Sugimoto once again emphasized how bizarre it is for him to see anyone want to make games look bad. Back then, when we went to great lengths to avoid distortion, and now they're being called flavor something, Sugimoto said, yes, he may be recalling the issues the original PlayStation had with depicting a depth and perspective and the struggle game developers face when trying to work around those issues. And yeah, I think of all of the different styles for indie games that are out there, these type of games are obviously trash tier in my opinion, because yeah, for so many of them that just simply rely on aesthetics and feelings of a nostalgia to compensate for basic bitch gameplay mechanics, this is the one that's really being pilfered right now. But of course, this is in fact a very niche problem, but something that is a little bit more wide-reaching, and while this might be a little bit divisive and a point of contention between you and I think something that we can all genuinely agree is that gaming music, okay, outside of a couple of very obvious examples. But when it comes to indie, I think we can put most of that aside. But these big AAA games that release, okay, for all of the ones that we have talked about in recent years, none of them really have great or memorable soundtracks, and especially as recently as you guys may or may not know if you've been following me long enough. I've been playing through quite a few Final Fantasy games recently, okay, this year in particular. After I got on the other side of, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth on PC, I picked up Final Fantasy 16, Final Fantasy 12 again, and now I'm trudging through 15. Hope to get it done sooner rather than later, but I despise that game. But really, yeah, outside of 12, which came out, God, what was that, 2006? Like, it has some good music, but Final Fantasy 16, okay, that is a trash game from toes to titties. The combat sucks, the characters suck, the plot is garbage. The world is atrocious, and the worst thing in regards to a Final Fantasy game, it has no memorable music. 15 is also very guilty of that as well, and they even know their shortcomings when it comes to music because they give you a portable MP3 player where you can just go ahead and play songs of years gone by composed by the great Nobuo Uematsu. And it's interesting, right? And playing Final Fantasy Remake and Rebirth so extensively over the past year and change. It'll be about 2 years by the time the end of the year rolls around, which really doesn't seem like it, and I just can't wait for more news about part 3, but in due time. Like, going back and hearing all of the great work that Nobu did back in 1997 for the original Final Fantasy VII, and everybody who was working on that remake trilogy, just the great work that they did. Like, I have both of the extended Remake and Rebirth soundtracks because they are that good. There are so many memorable new and remixed tracks from the past. Like in Rebirth particularly, there's one song that you hear for an optional side quest at like chapter 12 of the game where you go and take pictures of Red 13, and it's fucking better than everything that I've heard in AAA gaming over the past 5 years. And you hear it one time for one segment of one side quest. The track where you're climbing up Mount Corel didn't have to go that hard, but it does. Not even to mention all the remixes of Genova. All of them are terrific. You have the child choir for the first Genova encounter on what used to be the SS Shinra, but the Shinra 8 in Rebirth. Okay, and then you got that multi-part climactic meeting at the end of the game, which is so tremendous. Words escape me, okay? It's something that's going to live rent-free in my head until part 3 comes around and they just blow my mind again. But legendary Final Fantasy composer Nobuo Uematsu disappointed with less weirdness in modern video game music. I would just simply call it generic slop the whole way around. 16, I can't believe that I walk away from a Final Fantasy game and don't have a single memory of any of the music that's in it. Now, Uematsu, sorry. He composed the theme song for Remake and Rebirth, and it took me a while to come around on Hollow, but No Promises to Keep, that's a tremendous song in and of itself, and if you understand the greater implications it has on the story, it hits even harder, but that's just a great song in and of itself. And he's, outside of that, he's been away from Final Fantasy. I think 10 was the last game that he worked on, and that, it's like, you just go back and you listen to all of his soundtracks. It's like, he's right up there with Koji Kondo for a reason, and perhaps in certain respects, at least in my opinion, I'd put him a little bit higher than the legendary Nintendo composer, but that's just me, okay? I have my biases, you guys know them for certain. And 9 probably has the best soundtrack of the PlayStation era. So fucking good. Anyways, speaking as easily, one of the most leading experts in the entire genre, legendary Final Fantasy series composer Nobuo Uematsu has admitted that while production technology is more robust and accessible than in years past, the progress has led to an unfortunate lack of weirdness in modern video game music. And realistically, you extrapolate that out to pop music in general, and yeah, it's just this homogenization, sanitization, and just blasé nature of music in general. You see that man, if you're a gamer of a certain age, you see Safer Sephiroth descend from the top of your screen and immediately One Wing Angel comes to mind, okay? Remember, Uematsu, he wasn't classically trained or anything like that. He just fucking came up with all of these bangers for the love of the game. Man, Dancing Mad will just come into my head every once in a while for just no good reason. Battle on the Big Bridge. It's like, fuck man, nobody had the run that he had. Anyways, during a recent interview, the Japanese music outlet Real Sound Japan is held in service of getting his thoughts on a variety of new music related electronics, including Astel and Kern's A&M Ultima Bro, I don't really care. A lot of headphones and shit. The famed keyboard master was met with the observation that across numerous interviews in recent years, he seemed to believe that there was some stagnation in current game music. I mean, I agree. Uematsu explained in turn that while stagnation was not to be quite the right word, he did feel that the video game industry had become too corporate and safe in its approach to both composing and producing soundtracks. Not just soundtracks, but yeah, no, I understand. Okay. I didn't even know that Kefka was going to show up when I dropped Dancing Mad. It's that good. Actually, I could categorically say that Dancing Mad is better than One Winged Angel. Yeah, anyways, I wouldn't call it stagnation, but I do think that directors and producers hold too much power in the music department. Even now, composers in games aren't really in the position to voice their opinions. No matter how much knowledge and skill you have, it's hard to get your point across. There are very few producers who are very well versed in global entertainment and knowledgeable about various music genres. It often seems as sufficient to just play cinematic music reminiscent of John Williams. I agree, man. And especially with Final Fantasy 16, everything just has a superficial grandiosity to it where it's like, yeah, okay, tell me that you want to be making a Dark Souls score without telling me you want to make a Dark Souls score. It's so trash. I will just never get over my hatred of 16. Oh, yes, I want to personally change this situation, but the larger the content becomes, the more challenging it feels. Personally, I wish more vibrant young indie artists would step forward because, okay, where are game soundtracks flourishing? Well, Claire Obscure Expedition 33, a lot of the pixel art games that are out there that I was going and simultaneously deriding and holding up, they have fantastic soundtracks as well, like Shovel Knight. I understand that we're going back a little while on that, but that's a game that has a great soundtrack. I love Shovel Knight. Pressed by his host, if you felt like it was if it was a difficulty unique to game music, particularly given how the game comes before the music, it inevitably leads to a creation that conforms to it. Uematsu argued that such circumstances did not automatically preclude an artist from getting creative, as evidenced by his personal musical hero, Elton John. Okay. No, on that point, I think Elton John faced the same thing. He had to bring profits to his record company too, but so he had to prioritize selling over music. Even so, he kept making great albums after a string of masterpieces in the 70s. In that sense, I think there's still plenty we can do. History is an accumulation of traditions and culture from the past, so it's important in itself. But it's about where the people building that accumulation are looking. If we were satisfied with just doing the same thing as Star Wars, Indiana Jones composer, yes, John Williams, Harry Potter, and like honestly, you probably know John Williams is associated with Star Wars, but just the amount of stuff he's done, it's like it's him, Hans Zimmer, and pretty much that's it in music. They pretty much make up, like 80% of blockbusters that have tremendous soundtracks, but I digress. Oh, and Howard Shore. How could I forget? Yes, that would be the end of it, right? It's a bit extreme, but what kind of music would happen if you combine that with techno? I mean, now you're getting into his musical philosophy. Uematsu's here. It's a bit extreme, but I think it's okay to have that kind of idea. It's puzzling why young people aren't emerging now to make game music with analog synthesizers. If someone asked me, I'd absolutely do it. Oh my god, it'd be so good. From there, he asked if modern music producers' inability to play the real instruments was a major reason behind the industry-wide lack of experimentation. The man behind One Winged Angel? Yes. Posited this was just one part of the equation, the other being the desire to achieve pleasant perfection over everything else. Music producers are expensive too, but the analog synth approach used to be people like the late Japanese electronic music producer Aoso Tomita and Vangelis. I think it would be really interesting if done now, layering monosymphonic synthesizers over and over to create music with a unique texture. Honestly, I think the mainstream approach now is using sequencer computers with a pleasant sounding tones of digital synths, ensuring everything stays perfectly in tune, but music made by layering hand-played single-note synths, it's just different. To put it more simply, there's less of that weirdness to it, and I concur with the master. Honestly, I just, if I still had some of my old MP3 players or old CDs from the past, you would see so many different game soundtracks that are in there, in amidst a lot of 70s and 80s hard rock and heavy metal, but an overwhelming number of those game soundtracks would be Final Fantasy 6, 7, 8, 9, as well as a couple of other games that, Uematsu has worked on. The guy is a genius, and he knows exactly what he's talking about. And when he's talking about the stagnation of creativity in music, he's once again hit the nail directly on the head. So with all that said, thank you all very much for the gift of your time. I've been Don Consuelo. I want you to follow your gut and get after it. Take care, everyone.